So, today I shall review the Uber banner, Sengoku, Wargod, Vajiras. I'll review the set by reviewing the units one by one first. Before I start, I need to remind you that this is a common non-fest gacha banner, meaning it's usually a lower chance of getting Uber normally and may or may not be guaranteed. If you're planning to roll using catfood, it's always recommended to only roll during guaranteed using 11 draw. For ticket usage, that's up to you, though it's generally still more advisable to roll tickets on Fest if you want the most Ubers. Currently, the latest version of the game as the creation of this video is 9.5, and Vajira is currently the first ever set to not only get an 8 Uber but also gets a true form on all of the units. This is why I started on this set first. This Uber pool currently holds these units in unit number order: Sanada Yukimura, Maeda Keiji, Oda Nobunaga, Date Masamune, Takeda Shingen, Uesugi Kenshin, Imagawa Yoshimoto, and Narita Kaihime. This pool also has a legend rare unit, Musashi Miyamoto. As mentioned earlier, currently all units in this pool have a true form. However, as of Battlecats version 9.5, the only ones that have talents are Keiji, Oda, Yukimura, and Shingen. Therefore, evaluation of certain units might be outdated in the future. Now let's get into the set overview. The Sengoku Wargods Vajiras set, or also often just called Vajiras or Wargods, is a set where all of the units are based on Japanese historical war figures, or at least their names are. All units in this set have an ability against black traits, some having ability to multiple traits, but it will always at least target black enemies. That being said, a lot of these units' main selling points are more often than not their generally strong base stats rather than their anti-black ability, so this set could still be worth rolling even if you're not particularly looking for an anti-black unit. It should also be noted that by default I will always talk about these units in their true form unless stated otherwise, because the units in this set are mostly much worse before true form and probably shouldn't be used before true form unless you're still on early game. Now let's talk about the Ubers. Starting in order, first up we got Sanada Yukimura. True form is Immortal Yukimura. You can't really get any cooler than a War General bird with metal claws and a jetpack. It's unnecessary, but it's cool. This unit is arguably the best loot you can get from this Uber set. Yukimura is a suicidal rusher type unit, similar to that of Awakened Bahamut. Therefore, it's a unit that you won't exactly expect to survive too long compared to other Ubers. Yuki is a super speedy unit that instantly strikes anything it meets on the very first frame with the ability to inflict massive damage against black enemies. It has a relatively low health but very great damage and very low cooldown. Its attack animation is full backswing and has no real attack cooldown, therefore knocking Yukimura back instantly resets his attack. It is a powerful second Bahamut that is insanely effective against black enemies. It has many talents, but the main highlight is his Strengthen talent, in which he gains even more damage than his already powerful damage output. Of course, the downside is just like any other generic rusher type unit. It has slow range, it dies relatively fast, and if spawned carelessly or incorrectly might even die without doing anything significant at all. Generally, it's just about knowing where and when to use it though. Overall, this unit is an extremely solid rusher that does its job very well. It's very straightforward and is very powerful, arguably one of the best units in this set. Next is Maeda Keiji. True form is Immortal Keiji. That Sakura tree he's holding is supposed to be chopped off from his head, by the way. Keiji is a mid-ranger and a semi-tanker with wave immunity and has black resistance ability, and his damage is doubled upon reaching half health. His cooldown is fairly short and his cost is relatively cheap. Although it has a pretty high health and black resistance, usually he's not quite used for a designated tanker. He can tank LD enemies hits such as Dolphina, Taki, and Mole variants, but usually won't last long if tanking things straight head on. He has enough range to outrange most troublesome peons or mid-bosses as well as most common waiver enemies. Although his base damage isn't too high, his damage on strength and attack speed as well as cooldown makes up for it, which makes him a pretty powerful low cooldown mid-ranger as well as a general wave immunity unit. It has only 2 knockback counts, which both can hurt his survivability but also increase his sturdiness against long-range enemies or LD enemies. His main spotlight for talent is the increased Strengthen ability, which at max level gives him an extra 50% buff on trigger. Overall, Keiji is a very solid mid-ranger, anti-waver, and a semi-tank, and also widely considered among the best units in the set for its great all-rounder stats. Moving on to Oda Nobunaga. True form is Immortal Nobunaga. His design gets weirder the longer you look at him, like is he supposed to be the guy at the top, or the big face, or the cat, or whatever. This is one of the cases where the true form doesn't exactly add too much to its previous form, as the true form does not improve the unit by a significant amount. Therefore, it's, I guess, still usable on evolved form. Oda has the guaranteed chance to permafreeze black enemies. His perma-freeze is not only because of his respectable attack speed, but also because his freeze duration is insanely long. In his true form, he does double his health and increase his freeze duration, but it doesn't exactly matter much. His main weakness is his horrendous survivability, as he only has one knockback count. Not to mention that while he does outrange most black enemies, he cannot outrange Lenoir, which stands at the same range as him. True form does allow him to take at least one hit from General Lenoir, but his survivability is still very questionable. His talent did give him Lethal Strike Survivor, which is a great fit for him, but this didn't improve his usability by much at all. He also has Wave Resistance talent, but it also isn't helping him much either. His cooldown is fairly short and his damage is just on the mediocre side. But to make things worse, his power to freeze black enemies is more often than ever very replaceable by Bombercat. There's only a couple of enemies that Oda can freeze that Bomber cannot, but even then Oda struggles against the likes of Toucan, Lenoir, and often gets sniped by Taki. Sure, you can say, oh, he can solo like this all black stage, but you can pretty much get the job done with Bomber and decent support anyways, or especially if you have Pizza. That being said, there definitely are a good amount of times where Oda is much preferable than Bomber. For example, floor 24, where he can outrange Dark Laser, or some other specific situation where Bomber might not work too well. Overall, an unfortunate unit that is considered one of the least liked Uber in the banner. It has its uses, as his freeze can indeed be a powerful tool, but his survivability as well as a lot of outsider aspects drags him down pretty harshly. Next up is Dade Masamune, Immortal Masamune in true form, also known as Fidget Spinner Man. By the way, his horse's knees have teeth. Ugh. Masamune is a long-range damage dealer with the ability to knock back reds and blacks with a 40% chance. Masamune's main selling point is his very fast attack rate and good damage output. His ability to knock back reds and blacks is just an extra that is mostly just nice to have, as it can counter enemies such as Berserkori and occasionally things like JK Bunbun, Dark Oda, and most particularly Lenoir, whatever, the Black Elephant, whatever his name is supposed to be spelled with. With his pretty good damage and fast attack rate, he can clear peons well while also dealing a good amount of damage to boss enemies pretty well. His cost is also rather cheap and his cooldown is just the right amount. Masamune's downside comes mostly from his range. While he has enough range to outrange most common non-backliners and also outranging Lenoir, he only has just enough range to do so. 420 range isn't exactly impressive and he can get hit relatively early if not protected well enough. His health isn't exactly superb either and he only has 3 knockback counts. It's certainly enough to not be a problem too often, but at times his survivability can be problematic in specific situations. Overall, it's still a fairly solid range generalist with great respectable offensive capability and a usable extra ability. It has its issues though, but it doesn't pull him down too badly. Moving on, next one is Takeda Shingen, the true form being Immortal Shingen. I can't even tell what that mask is supposed to be. Also, he wields extra access for absolutely no reason. Shingen is a unit with the target only ability, in which Shingen can only target black and alien enemies. Using talent, he can also target angels. Shingen has a humongous stats in both offense and defense, and in true form his range is high enough to outrange all common non-backliner black, alien, and angel enemies while standing at a very safe distance. His damage output is insanely high, which is a must if you're a target-only unit. His recharge is not too bad, but his cost is really huge. Though, true talent, it can be reduced up to 1,500 cut cost, which is very big. Despite his large health, he only has 2 knockback count, but since he stands at a very big range, his survivability, while could also be better, isn't a big downfall. Being a target-only unit, it is also possible to stack him up on his non-target enemies, which can make a pretty big difference. Shingen is a weapon of mass destruction to all the trait he counters, though ironically, black enemies might be his worst matchup due to the tendency of their high knockback count that may make Shingen's attack miss. Shingen counters many annoying ranged angel and alien enemies such as Ursa Major, Slipnir, Chick-fil-A, and Wing Piggy. His only biggest real issue is, of course, the fact that he cannot damage anything besides his main trait, and the fact that he's very susceptible to being cursed, where he will be completely unable to attack once cursed. His attack animation is also relatively long, and missing a shot can be quite a problem as well. Overall though, Shingen is a very solid unit that became even more solidified thanks to his talents, and is a very powerful unit on countering the 3 traits that he already targets. His weakness mostly comes from other traits as well as somewhat problematic attack animation and attack rate, but he still shows a very powerful impact against the right enemies. Moving on to Uesugi Kenshin, with Immortal Kenshin as her true form. And no, Uesugi Kenshin in Japanese history isn't a girl, but this is a gacha game, they turn anyone into a waifu. A ranged unit with the ability to knock back black enemies with a guaranteed chance and has strong versus black. She has both respectable health and base damage as well as decent cooldown, and not to mention a relatively short attack animation and attack speed, which can make her a pretty good generalist. Unfortunately, she's rather lacking in other departments. Her range is just about Dragon's range, and she only has 3 knockback count, which, while is fine, really could be increased considering her range. Not to mention her cost is also rather hefty. She couldn't outrange Lenore, though she would instantly knock Lenore back if she managed to hit Lenore in the first place since their range is similar. Not to mention, due to her 3 knockback count and strong ability, she could tank weaker magnification Lenore without getting flinched. Her knockback ability also doesn't have a good synergy with shorter range units like Bomber or even Pizza, as she often would knock black enemies, even the sturdy ones, possibly into the range of enemy backliners. That being said, she still has the damage to boot, and her attack cycle is very nice as well. She can still be used as damager for enemies that she outranges and peon clearers, especially black peons. She currently has yet to receive talents, so it's possible that she might be better with future talents. Overall, she's a rather mediocre unit who's not entirely special, but her damage and ability could be reliable in certain situations despite her shortcomings. One can say it's a unit with untapped potential currently. Now moving on to Imagawa Yoshimoto. Immortal Yoshimoto in true form. He may look cool in like HD and whatever, but then you check out the cats and then you realize they're immensely low quality for some reason. Classic Ponos. Yoshimoto is a ranged LD unit with weaken and strong against black enemies. His weaken is nearly permanent with treasure and weakens for the usual 50% strength. Yoshimoto stands at a fairly comfortable range with good cooldown and decent cost. His LD also reaches extremely far while his blind spot is relatively small. Of course, being a widespread LD unit comes with the cost of having low base DPS, which is a fair trade to say. It's not terrible DPS, but it is a fair one for this LD reach. His health is just good enough to not be bad as he has 3 knockbacks, so his survivability is also really just mediocre. That being said, his ability is also pretty nice. Although weakening and damaging black peons sounds just decent and not too impressive, the one thing that he counters very well is Taki. With being able to both receive cut damage and weakening Takis, Yoshimoto is a nice support to have against them. Overall, Yoshimoto is really just a decently good LD unit with extra power to counter Takis and black enemies in general. It is one of the most standard LD unit you can get. Moving on to last one, Narita Kaihime, who has just received her true form Immortal Kaihime in 9.5. She's also the first unit to gain the Savage Blow ability. I'm sure she's one of your favorites if you're into some tick ties, there's no contest here. She is a ranged attacker who has a guaranteed chance to slow black and zombies, and she also has the Z-Killer ability. In true form, her health doubled and became much bulkier, and her Savage Blow chance is increased from 15% to 25%. Kaihime stands at a decent standing range, but her base damage output is rather low. This is where her Savage Blow comes into play, where if counting her Savage Blow, her overall damage output actually becomes pretty good. Unfortunately, this means her damage output heavily relies on Savage Blows, though this becomes less of a problem in true form. Her health is immensely high for a ranger unit, however she only has 2 knockback counts, which still imposes a problem to her survivability. This 2 knockback count especially hurts against zombies, which she's supposed to counter. Though you can say she has a similar case like Keiji, where you would use her health and lack of knockback count to tank LD enemies, especially ones that can easily target Kaihime such as Taki. Since she isn't as disposable as Keiji, it's not exactly a big plus point. You can use her high health to tank Zamal or tank hits from Gravy or like maybe Dolphina or something, but that's more or less it. It's not too big. Her slow is also usually more or less just a little extra, as the duration is pretty short. Just a slight extra control for black or zombie peons if it hits. It's even worse for the case of zombies, as you also already got Volter and Psycho with talents who both are much better in slowing zombies compared to Kaihime. If any, the one that's impacted the most from her slow is probably Cadaver Bear, which isn't exactly saying much as her short slow doesn't exactly do much against their immense pushing power. Her positive points mostly comes from her possibility of giving out huge damage output that, unfortunately, relies on RNG. Her survivability is often questionable despite her giant health, making her a rather odd generalist. Overall, not exactly the worst thing around, as her Savage Blow can grant miracles, but most likely won't be your first choice in picking reliable generalists due to her awkward survivability and RNG dependence. Finally, let's talk about the legend rare in this set, Miyamoto Musashi. Not to be confused with the Special Legend unit, Miyamoto Musashi. He literally stole the name of the original Special Cat Musashi and forced him to change his name, and he also stole Ilia's Berserker design. We'll still call this one Musashi though. Musashi is a ranged stat-based unit designed to be a powerful black-traded specialist, having resist and insane damage ability against them. Musashi has good price, mediocre range, high health, good knockback count, and great cooldown, not to mention attacking nearly constantly, having 2-hit multi-hits with little to no attack rate. With its abilities, it takes little damage and deals insanely gigantic damage output against black enemies, but this comes with the cost of it being a single target unit. That being said, his pure damage and attack speed is enough to justify itself being single target, well, against black enemies anyways. His prowess against black enemies does not need to be questioned. However, outside of his traits, he basically becomes just a powerful dragon cat. The thing about Musashi being single target though is on mixed trait stages, he won't be able to hit black enemies if they are hiding behind stronger, tankier, non-black enemies such as one horns or old horns. He pretty much won't work at all there. Then there's also the case of stages with black peon spam, where I personally see him having single target to not be that big of a problem actually. Easy to knock back black enemies such as Dark Doges or Gory Black are very easily dispatched by Pizza and Cyborg spamming, while tankier enemies like SBK or the very hard to knock back Dark Oda, who are much more of a threat, would get nuked by Musashi. In a way, him being single focus unit turns out to not be too terrible of a problem in this case. Not exactly a complicated unit, obviously it doesn't fare well against Peon heavy stage since it's only single target, but can still become a somewhat decent extra damage dealer for shorter range bosses like Aros if there's not much peons blocking the way. Overall, still a pretty solid unit with absolute destruction on one trait, while it also having just a decent enough performance against other traits. So, those are all the units originating from Sengoku Wargods Vajiras banner. I believe the general consensus of this set by the community is that, well, people are really just gonna be rolling for Yukimura or Keiji, honestly. However, it's not an entirely risky set, as all units here can still be valuable in some ways. Most of them generally have good enough stats that allows them to be used in huge variety of situations or to just give out extra health. Oda is really the worst thing you can get here, and even then you might still find some usages out of him. Maybe. As for my own opinion, if you're looking for a generalist that focuses on anti-black, I can definitely recommend this set. Though be sure to still consider other sets too. Some other sets might be more favorable for you depending on what you already have or what you have trouble with, or how much risk you want to take. I can't dictate every one of you on what to roll or how to roll, so do use your own judgment however you think is wise in the end. That is all for my evaluation on Sengoku Wargods Vajiras. I hope I can shed some light about this set if you were still previously unsure. That is all for now. This is the first one in this series. I'll definitely be trying to make more of these, but I might need to choose some set that won't get outdated too easily. Vajiras is an easy pick because it just received its 8th true form, but at the same time I also don't really want to wait for every set to have an 8th Uber and a true form before reviewing them. Well, thank you for watching, see you next time, yada yada yada, bye. Also, who's gonna be that one guy who's gonna spam Vaji racist on their comment, huh? Huh?